Welcome to In Context. This is the Liberty News. My name is Ken McDermott Rowe.
And I'm Gus Cantivero.
Tomorrow there's a very important primary in the Republican race for the nomination for the presidency in Michigan and another one in Arizona. The Michigan polls, very important to Romney, his father was governor there, shows a very close race. Another poll which is very interesting, the Rasmussen poll, shows that both Romney and Ron Paul are ahead of Obama in national polling. So this is an interesting development, even though Paul doesn't seem to be running well in Michigan and Arizona. Shows that he's running well to a cross-section of American voters.
The most interesting thing is that when polling just directly Republicans, you see this gap where he is lagging many points behind in the national polls and in many of the key states. But when polled nationally, regardless of what your party affiliation is, Ron Paul does so much better. And in fact, this morning, it was released, the Rasmussen poll, Romney is leading Obama 45-43, and Ron Paul is leading 43-41. But what's really important about that is that Ron Paul's getting 15% of the self-described liberal vote.
And this is probably has to do with his views on the war. He's obviously opposed to the war, and also his views on civil liberty. I mean, it was denounced the military detention bill that Obama signed as a really death to American civil rights.
And on free speech, unlike a lot of Republicans, because he actually came out to defend flag burning, which is not something that I agree with, but it's your First Amendment right. You don't have to love America just to live here. That's not a prerequisite to get First Amendment protection. So if you want to burn a flag, that's your right to do so. Not something I personally agree with, and not something Ron Paul agrees with, but it's something that he thinks that we should protect. And I think that's very important.
I think it is too. And it's very interesting that he has this broad-based appeal. And what would seem to emerge, it seems obvious to me, is an alliance between populists of all spectrums, left, right, Republican, Democratic, on certain core issues such as the erosion of our civil rights through the Patriot Act, the military detention bill, and the destruction of our economy through this foolhardy global war that we're engaged in. This alliance should emerge. I don't think Ron Paul is going to get the Republican nomination. Well, I hope we have a candidate to vote for in the fall who's going to have a sensible policy on a good foreign policy and is going to protect our civil rights. But do we see this alliance emerging? You noted Lawrence O'Donnell was addressing the Ron Paul's campaign, and he doesn't seem to get it.
Right. This is a screen grab taken from the Thursday, the 23rd, February 23rd show. In the final segment entitled Rewrite, he was addressing the Republican debate from the previous night, Wednesday, I think the 22nd.
And for those who don't know Lawrence O'Donnell, his reputation is he's a self-described socialist, right?
That's right. He describes himself as a socialist, and he defends that, and that's fine. Like I just mentioned, our First Amendment rights, he has the right to believe in whatever system that he particularly agrees with. But let's get one thing straight. He's a Harvard grad. He's an establishment, longtime insider. He worked on Senator Moynihan's campaign. He's been on the inside of writing bills for the Democrats, and he was involved in writing bills under President Clinton. So just keep it straight that he is an insider. But his positions should be lining up with Ron Paul's because he's against the war, right? One of his biggest issues is the war.
And also, I'm sure he's a critic of the Patriot Act. I would guess he's a critic of the Patriot Act.
One would presume.
Yes, and the erosion of our civil rights. But how does he react to the Paul campaign?
Well, not very favorably. I mean, when you do a quick search for Lawrence O'Donnell and Ron Paul, and you'll come up with a long list of videos where he is going after Ron Paul, either on or off camera, where Ron Paul is a guest on the show. He's attacking him outrightly, bringing up rather unfair attacks. Then when he's by himself, he's attacking Ron Paul. It seems like he's obsessed with attacking Ron Paul. Why so much importance placed on attacking Ron Paul? I think that it's just fear of losing the base of the party to this populist movement. People are starting to get so disenfranchised with the right-left paradigm, they're realizing how pointless it is to re-elect whoever the most popular candidate is every 4 years. And they're just, I think they're leaving. I think they're leaving the party. Young people are going to Ron Paul for a reason, because they don't see any possibility of change or hope for the future. And this empty vessel technique, as you always point out with Obama, really works. But it loses its steam after a short period of time, and we see that because the youth now are not as enamored with Obama the second time around as they were the first.
The left-right paradigm is a phony one. It's what keeps us subjugated to large corporations because, let's face it, through their financing of political campaigns, through their lobbyists, through their control of the media, they've got both parties well under control, and it's unlikely that Ron Paul is going to break through as a nominee. So why does Lawrence O'Donnell buy into this?
Let's get right into what they were talking about. They were talking again about the birth control issue and whether it should be federally funded or mandated insurance or not, and this as it ties into Planned Parenthood. And the three other candidates get a chance to answer. They say they shouldn't fund Planned Parenthood, and Rick Santorum gets a chance, and he says that he was sorry that he voted for the funding for Planned Parenthood, and he didn't know that they'd be using the funds for abortions and be giving out morning after pills and things like that. But, he should know better than that. And Ron Paul, last to answer, had the chance to say, Rick, you should have known that funds are fungible. They can be used for anything that they want once you give them the money. There's no way to put a roadblock on what the money's used for. Shame on you for being surprised that they used it for things that you didn't expect. Rick Santorum went on to say that birth control pills have contributed to the downfall of our immorality in our society by allowing for more unnecessary personal risks, and it leads to the spread of STDs, teen pregnancy, and other problems in our society. Ron Paul rebutted him by saying that the idea that birth control pills beget immorality is a fallacy, and that it's the immorality that begets the need for morning after pills. So you have to change the morality of your society in order to do away with things like needing morning after pills or abortions. So then he went on to say, this is the same argument that conservatives always use with gun control. They say guns don't kill people, criminals kill. So Lawrence O'Donnell takes the one part of that segment of his answer, and I quote, he said, sort of along the lines of the pills creating the immorality. I think the immorality creates the problem of wanting to use the pills. Lawrence O'Donnell, staring with a blank stare into the camera, speaking very slowly and seriously to emphasize the point, says, and I quote, Ron Paul just equated sex with immorality. He just said that wanting to have sex without having a baby is immoral. So if you're an anti-war or legalized marijuana crowd, your candidate for president thinks that you are immoral if you use contraception. That is just a blatant propaganda technique, okay? And then using silly amateur iconography like a marijuana leaf and a peace sign next to his face to discredit him and make him look like a silly clown, and then playing parts out of context when he was calling Rick Santorum a fake. And he said, no, you're a fake, Ron Paul. You're a fake libertarian. Well, Lawrence O'Donnell, you're a fake journalist, okay? To use techniques like this, to put words in someone's mouth that he didn't intend to say. And in the write-up blurb underneath the clip on the MSNBC website, it says, in this week's GOP debate, Ron Paul talked about his unyielding opposition to a woman's right to choose, saying the government should prevent all abortions, the standard Republican Party line. That is bunk. That's not what he said, and I am attacking you for putting words in his mouth because you stand to lose by having the young people not gravitate toward the Democrat Party and go toward the populist movement. So you're the one with something to lose, and you're a mouthpiece for the machine. And I'm going after you, Lawrence O'Donnell, because you are not a real journalist.
And it's time we built this populist movement, and I don't see why he sees it. And maybe he's afraid of losing his franchise, because we're on the eve of a big escalation in the Mideast, military intervention in Syria. The expansionists are pushing for an attack on Iran. And the populists of all spectrums who see that this is a disastrous foreign policy, who want to rebuild this country instead of spending money on pointless wars overseas, need to get together. So I think maybe we need a new list of progressive spokesmen on the corporate TV.
And to be fair, because I am not a partisan, Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes on MSNBC have both been very fair to Ron Paul on a number of occasions and have actually defended to Lawrence O'Donnell's face a lot of Ron Paul's techniques with getting the youth in. And Rachel Maddow even said in a clip to Lawrence O'Donnell's face that we ignore Ron Paul at our own peril.
Well, he represents the future, I believe, and as our viewers know, we're not left wingers, we're not right wingers. We just think this country ought to be run for the benefit of the American. The average American ought to be run by the average American, not by some corporate elite that wants to make a lot of money off of wars. We need to reduce unemployment in this country and rebuild our infrastructure. And on a different note, the people of Wyoming seem to be very concerned about the possibility of things really going very badly wrong in this country. And just recently, the State House in Wyoming passed a bill which calls for a study of what to do in the event of a complete economic or political collapse in the United States. Mm-hmm. And some of the things the task force is going to have to look at is, should Wyoming issue its own currency in the event of a collapse? Should Wyoming have a draft, try to raise its own army, a standing army perhaps, to protect Wyoming in the absence of any defense coming from the federal government? Should it even acquire strike aircraft? And one of the things I found most unusual, an aircraft carrier, because the last time I looked at a map, Wyoming wasn't on the Pacific or the other ocean either. So,
well, you never know. It could be floods.
But I'm laughing at that suggestion of an aircraft carrier. But I think these guys, I don't think it's a crazy thing. I have insurance, insurance on my house, and I think it's very unlikely my house is going to burn down. But just in case.
You're a conspiracy theorist for having house insurance.
They do sometimes, and so I think these guys in Wyoming aren't that foolish. So
I think that they're looking at the trends of the recent past in America. What happened in New Orleans? Okay, they banked that FEMA was going to come in and save them. What happened? It was a complete disaster. We can't. What happened in, was it Joplin last year with the tornadoes that ripped through there? They waited for FEMA to come in. They were left in the dark because soon afterward there were floods nearby. FEMA had to leave them high and dry. They weren't repaired yet. They haven't gotten their power back up, and FEMA just picked up and left because they had other responsibilities.
Now, a lot of it's mismanagement, and we saw that, yes, particularly in Katrina. But I think what's looming in the future, and Ron Paul sees this and some other candidates, is the bankruptcy of the federal government. We have a $15 trillion national debt.
And there's no way that we're going to be able to afford
that's cited by the sponsor of this Wyoming
response
bill.
To things. If we have a national catastrophe on an east and west scale with both shores, with say nuclear meltdowns simultaneously or earthquakes, who's going to be there to save places like Wyoming? They're going to have to depend on themselves.
We need to pay more attention to our state governments and to our local governments and organize our communities I think not just for emergency situations, but a lot of responsibilities of government that we've sort of looked to the federal government to take care of, like education. Do we need a federal education department when we have having a deficit this year of something like $1.4 trillion? Mm-hmm. Astronomical. It's like almost 10% of our GDP. We're not far from being like Greece. Our federal government is it. And when the government's broke, it's just not going to provide services that we've been expecting.
Case in point, I think it just comes down to the fact that it's not a bad idea to be prepared should disaster strike. And we see that in countries like Switzerland that actually have a national response protocol. Should there be some kind of a major disaster, they have place food and water and shelters for people to go to should their citizens require it. And here in the United States, it's just for the rich people. That's all we have. We have response for the wealthy.
Well, I hope that we don't have to have a huge domestic disaster in order to wake up. I mean, one that affects the whole nation. I think Katrina should have been enough of a warning that we need to get ourselves organized.
Absolutely. We've even had several since Katrina, as I mentioned, Joplin and others. So, we think that that's a real threat that we need to prepare. And this country is woefully unprepared.
So what we're calling for is a new foreign policy, one that brings our troops home, brings American money home to rebuild our infrastructure, create a decent economy, and start to provide services to the American people.
And create jobs in the meantime.
Create jobs that the federal government is not going to be able to do in the future.
That's right. I think that does it for this edition of In Context Liberty News. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, visit our website at incontextreport.com, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.